He was a man who had everything people dreamed of: wealth, influence, and a life many envied, yet he often felt a quiet emptiness inside. Every day was filled with meetings, phone calls, and decisions that affected many lives, but rarely anyone asked about his own happiness. One evening, as he returned home, the sky was dimming with the soft glow of the city lights reflecting on the glass of his high-rise building. The streets were busy with people rushing to their destinations, but his attention was caught by something unusual outside his building. There was a woman sitting on the low steps, just outside the entrance. She seemed tired, worn from the day, and her clothes were simple but neat in a way that suggested she cared about her appearance. Despite her struggles, she held a small bag close to her chest and occasionally looked around as if waiting for someone or something. He had walked past countless people in his life, some in need, others indifferent, but something about her presence felt different. It was not just curiosity. He felt it was an inexplicable pull that made him slow his pace and observe her. He hesitated, for a moment wondering if he should approach or simply continue. Inside, the logical part of his mind told him she was just another stranger in the city. But another part told him to stop and see who she was. The air was cool, and he noticed her shivering. Slightly, he decided to step closer and ask if she needed help. She looked up as he came near, and for a brief moment their eyes met. There was a softness in her gaze, a cautious friendliness that made him feel a connection he could not explain. He asked if she was all right, and she nodded, though there was a hint of weariness in her voice. She thanked him quietly for noticing her, and it was enough to spark a conversation. They spoke about small things: the weather, the crowd passing by, even the little dog that wandered near her feet. She smiled when he mentioned it, as if the simple acknowledgement of the animal meant a lot to her. He realized that her world was very different from his, yet there was an authenticity in her presence that he found refreshing. They talked for a few minutes, and he learned she waited for a friend who often passed by this area. She laughed softly when she described the unpredictability of city life, and he found himself drawn to the sound of it. As he turned to leave, he felt a strange reluctance. She had not said much, but the brief encounter left a lingering feeling in him. He glanced back and saw her waving gently at a passing stranger. It struck him how genuine her gestures were, something he rarely saw in his own circles of wealth and influence. He continued inside, but the image of her stayed with him during the quiet elevator ride up to his apartment. The next day he found himself walking past the building at the same time, hoping to see her again. It was unusual for him to let something so small affect him, yet he realized that her presence had brought a spark to his routine life. He noticed the way she helped an elderly man with his bag, without hesitation, and the kindness in her eyes when a child asked for directions. He watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude, but he felt compelled to understand more about this woman who had captured his attention with her simple acts of humanity. Days passed, and he continued observing her from afar. She seemed unaware of his silent watch, and carried on with her life gracefully. She smiled at people who hurried past and spoke softly to those in need. There was a calmness in her demeanor that contrasted sharply with the noise and chaos of the city. He began to feel a strange sense of peace whenever he saw her. It was as if her presence reminded him of the world outside his office of contracts and decisions, and reminded him of the simple joys that life often overlooked. One evening he decided to approach her again, but more intentionally this time. He carried a small cup of tea, knowing the evenings were often cold. She looked surprised when he offered it, but accepted it with a hesitant smile. They shared the warmth in silence for a few moments, and he realized that the simplest gesture could mean so much to someone. She thanked him again softly, and they began to talk about their lives in small fragments. He learned that she worked long hours and often struggled to make ends meet. She spoke about her family and the challenges she faced without complaint. There was a resilience in her voice, a strength that fascinated him. He realized that the world he lived in, with all its power and privilege, often lacked this kind of quiet courage. He started to look forward to these brief meetings outside his building. They were not just encounters, but windows into a world he had forgotten existed, a world where kindness mattered more than money, and where small gestures could carry immense meaning. He felt his heart opening in ways he had never experienced before. He listened more intently than he had ever listened to anyone, and found himself sharing small truths about his life that he normally kept private. She responded with understanding and empathy. Never judgment or envy. Her reactions were genuine and sincere, and he cherished every moment of it. Even as the city moved around them with its endless noise and haste, they created a quiet space for themselves on those steps. She spoke about her dreams, her fears, and the little joys she found in daily life. He found himself laughing at her stories about minor mishaps during the day, and she smiled at his reactions. They began to understand each other in a way that went beyond words, beyond appearances, beyond the social barriers that often separated people. As the week went on, he noticed changes in himself. He was more patient, more attentive, and more willing to pause in life to notice the beauty around him. He realized that meeting her had awakened something dormant inside him, a part of his soul that longed for connection, for authenticity, for love not based on status or power, but on shared humanity. He admired her courage, her honesty, and the way she carried herself with dignity. Despite life's challenges, one evening, as he prepared to leave the building, he saw her struggling with a heavy bag. He immediately rushed to help, and together they managed to carry it inside. She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment, but he simply smiled and said it was no trouble. She laughed softly, and he felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with his wealth or position. It was a feeling of genuine satisfaction of being able to help someone in a meaningful way. He realized that his days had started to revolve around these small interactions outside his building. She was becoming a part of his life without even knowing it, and he cherished the quiet anticipation of seeing her. She had no idea of the effect she had on him, and he decided it was too early to reveal too much about himself. Instead, he chose to continue learning about her world, listening, understanding, and quietly appreciating her presence. The first part of their story was not about grand gestures or dramatic events. It was about noticing each other in a busy world, about pausing and seeing the humanity in someone else. It was about the quiet spark of connection that could grow into something extraordinary over time. He felt a stirring of emotions he had never fully recognized, and knew that this encounter would change his life in ways he could not yet imagine. He left the building that night with a sense of anticipation mixed with a calm resolve. He wanted to know her more, understand her more, and perhaps one day share with her the life he had always kept separate from the world outside. He smiled to himself, realizing that sometimes the most unexpected meetings could open doors to a future full of possibilities, and hoped the woman outside his building had become the center of his thoughts, not because of who she was to the world, but because of who she was to him. Her kindness, her resilience, and the quiet light she brought into his life had begun to fill the emptiness he had long carried. Days turned into weeks, and the man found himself looking forward to the moments when he could see her outside his building. She had become a quiet presence in his life that brought a sense of calm and warmth he had not experienced before. He noticed the small things about her, the way she arranged her bag carefully before sitting down, the gentle way she spoke to people passing by, and the patience she showed when children or animals approached her. There was a rhythm to her life that he admired and wished to understand better. He began to approach her more often, but always carefully, never wanting to overwhelm or frighten her. She responded to his presence with cautious friendliness, and he respected that. He learned that she worked long hours in a small cafe nearby, often stayed late to save extra money for her family. He listened as she spoke about her responsibilities and challenges without complaint. There was a resilience in her voice that drew him in and made him realize how different their worlds were, yet how similar their need for human connection could be. One afternoon, he offered to carry her groceries from the corner store. She looked surprised and hesitant at first, but eventually accepted. As they walked side by side, he noticed the way she laughed at small things, the way she shared stories about her customers at the cafe, and the pride she took in the small victories of her day. He found himself smiling more than he had in years, feeling a genuine happiness that had nothing to do with his wealth or power. He started leaving small gestures of kindness without making them feel like obligations. He would bring her a warm drink on cold days or help her with a task that seemed too heavy. She often thanked him quietly, but never made him feel important or obligated to continue. These moments built trust and slowly dissolved the barriers Between them, they began sharing more personal stories about their lives. He told her about the pressures of his work, the endless meetings and decisions that weighed on him. She listened with interest without judgment, and offered insights that were surprisingly simple yet wise. She spoke about her childhood, her hopes, and the lessons she had learned. Through hardship, he realized that her understanding of life was deep despite her modest circumstances. One evening, they sat on the steps as the sun went down and the city lights flickered on. The world around them was busy, noisy, and indifferent, yet they found a small bubble of quiet together. He noticed how. She noticed the little things in life, the patterns of people walking, by the rhythm of the traffic, and even the way the wind moved through the trees. There was beauty in her attention to life, and he felt grateful for it. Over time, he noticed that. He began to change. She reminded him to slow down, to see the world with more care. He found himself listening more attentively in meetings, noticing small details he had ignored before, and feeling more connected to the people around him. Even in his professional life, he realized that observing her kindness and patience had a ripple effect on his own behavior. He also became aware of the judgments of others. His colleagues and friends could not understand why he spent time with someone outside his social class. They questioned his motives and made comments that suggested he might be taking advantage of her, or she might be taking advantage of him. He struggled with their assumptions, yet felt strongly that his connection with her was genuine. And beyond superficial concerns, she, on the other hand, had her own doubts. She wondered if she truly belonged in his world, or if their connection was fleeting. She worried that people would judge her for being with someone of such influence, yet she also felt a sense of trust and comfort in his presence. That trust encouraged her to open up slowly and to accept his gestures without fear or suspicion. One rainy day, she was waiting under the building entrance. When he arrived with an umbrella, he handed it to her and walked with her until she was safe under a shop awning nearby. They spoke about their days and shared small laughs despite the rain soaking their surroundings. He noticed how her spirit remained unbroken despite hardships, and felt admiration and affection growing in his heart. He wanted to do more than just observe. He wanted to support and protect her in ways that felt natural and respectful. Their conversations began to include dreams and small ambitions. She talked about wanting to open a small cafe of her own someday or take courses to improve her skills. He encouraged her, subtly offering advice and sometimes discreetly helping with resources without making it feel like charity. She appreciated the support, yet felt it was grounded in genuine care rather than obligation. He found joy in learning the small routines of her life. The way she started her mornings with a simple breakfast, the careful attention to her work, the small rituals of kindness she practiced daily, all painted a picture of a life lived with dignity. He reflected on his own routines and realized that, despite all his wealth and power, he had missed the beauty of simplicity and authenticity that she carried effortlessly. There were quiet moments when they simply sat together without speaking, watching the world move past them. She would occasionally hum softly or point out something interesting in the street. He found comfort in these silences, realizing that connection did not always need words and that shared presence could build a bond deeper than conversations alone. He began inviting her to small experiences within his influence, but without overwhelming her. She would accompany him to a gallery or a quiet cafe he favored. She experienced things she had never imagined, yet she approached them with humility and curiosity rather than awe or pretension. He found her reactions refreshing and grounding, reminding him that life's value was not in status but in the way one experienced each moment. Even as their friendship deepened, he remained mindful of her comfort and boundaries. He never pushed her into unfamiliar situations without her consent. He respected her pace and allowed the connection to grow naturally. She responded with warmth and gradual openness, appreciating the balance he maintained between interest and respect. One afternoon, he noticed she looked tired and stressed. She confided that the cafe had been unusually busy and that she worried about expenses. She did not ask for help, but he quietly arranged for support that would ease her burden. Did it discreetly to ensure she did not feel embarrassed or dependent. She later thanked him indirectly with a smile and a story that hinted at relief without exposing the assistance. He realized that supporting someone respectfully required understanding their dignity and choices. They began to notice the subtle joys of everyday life together. He would point out a flower blooming in an unexpected place, or a bird perched on a ledge. She would smile at the observation and add her own note about the small wonders she encountered. He found that through her eyes, the city seemed brighter and softer, and he felt his own life infused with color and warmth. He had not realized was missing. The man and the woman created a rhythm of presence and support that felt natural to both. She learned to trust his intentions, and he learned to appreciate her resilience and kindness. They were slowly bridging the gap between their worlds through shared attention and respect.
Oh.
The relationship was not dramatic or forceful, but quiet, patient, and profoundly human. Through these weeks, he felt emotions he had rarely acknowledged. There was curiosity, admiration, and a growing affection that went beyond mere interest. He realized that what drew him most was not her appearance or her circumstances, but the way she lived her life with courage and authenticity. She had a way of seeing the world that reminded him of things he had forgotten and inspired him to be a better version of himself. Their interactions became a consistent part of his days. She had become a presence that brought him calm and hope, even in the midst of the pressures and responsibilities he carried in his work life. He found that he could be himself around her, share parts of his thoughts, and listen without judgment. She offered understanding without conditions, and that openness was rare in his world. By the end of this part of the story, the bond between them had grown quietly and steadily. It was built on trust, patience, and the simple gestures that showed care and attention. They were discovering each other's worlds not through grand displays, but through small, daily interactions that held meaning. They were beginning to understand that true connection required observation, empathy, and respect, and that love often started with the willingness to truly see another human being. As weeks passed, their bond grew deeper and more meaningful. The man found himself thinking about her even when he was busy at work. He realized that he looked forward to the moments outside his building when he could share time with her. She had a way of bringing calm to his hectic life and a perspective that made him see the world differently than before. One afternoon, she mentioned how much she loved small adventures. She spoke about visiting new places, walking in parks, and discovering quiet corners of the city that most people ignored. He listened intently and suggested they explore together in a way that would feel comfortable to her. She agreed with a soft smile, and they began to take small walks through nearby streets. Noticing details that others overlooked, they watched the way the sun reflected on windows, how birds moved from tree to tree, and the quiet patterns of people going about their day. They spoke about little things and found joy in shared observation. Through these small experiences, he learned more about her life. She spoke about her family, the responsibilities she carried, and the challenges she faced. She had worked hard for everything she had, and often put others before herself. He admired her strength and began to understand that her world was full of struggles that he had never imagined. Despite this, she carried herself with dignity and kindness. Her resilience inspired him and made him reflect on his own life. He began to share parts of his life with her too, not the details of meetings or business deals, but small, personal stories that he rarely told anyone. She listened without judgment and offered her thoughts with insight that surprised him. She encouraged him to take small breaks and reminded him that life was not only about work and responsibility, but also about enjoying simple moments. She became a mirror, showing him parts of himself he had forgotten. Their friendship began to take on a deeper emotional tone. He realized he cared for her more than he had expected. There was admiration, affection, and a desire to protect her. He noticed the way he felt a sense of joy when she laughed or shared a story about her day, and a sense of longing when they were apart. He did not rush anything, but allowed his feelings to develop naturally, giving her space and time to understand her own emotions. They faced challenges as well. The outside world often questioned their connection. His colleagues made subtle remarks, and she worried about how people would perceive her being with someone from a different social circle. They discussed these concerns openly and honestly, reassuring each other that their connection was genuine, and based on mutual respect, they decided to focus on what mattered to them, rather than the opinions of others. One evening, they sat on a quiet bench in a small park near the building. She shared a memory from her childhood. About watching sunsets with her family and the joy it brought her, he listened with attention and felt a deep sense of connection. He realized that these moments of sharing personal experiences built trust and understanding in a way that words alone could not. They began to support each other in small, practical ways. It would help with errands or offer guidance when needed. She, in turn, reminded him to pause and notice the small joys around him. She encouraged him to see beyond his structured life and appreciate the spontaneous beauty in everyday events. They complemented each other in a way that felt natural and balanced over time. He noticed changes in himself. He became more patient, more attentive, and more willing to listen. He found himself engaging more deeply with people at work, noticing their needs and thoughts in a way he had not before. He realized that observing her kindness and patience influenced him to be a better person, not just in private, but in every area of life. She also felt changes within herself. She began to trust more easily and allowed herself to experience joy without fear. She found comfort in his presence and appreciated his genuine interest in her world. He respected her boundaries and never pressured her into situations she was uncomfortable with. This careful balance allowed their relationship to grow steadily. One afternoon, she mentioned her dream of furthering her education or learning new skills. He encouraged her to pursue these ambitions and quietly supported her efforts. He arranged small opportunities that helped her progress without making her feel indebted. This discreet support strengthened her trust and deepened their bond. They began to share more meaningful conversations about values, life, and hope. She spoke about the importance of honesty and integrity, and how she tried to live by these principles. Even in difficult times, he shared reflections on his own life, acknowledging mistakes and lessons learned. Their dialogue became a foundation for understanding and mutual respect. They spent time noticing the small pleasures of life. Together, he would point out a flower blooming in an unexpected place, or the rhythm of a fountain in a park. She would respond with delight, adding her own observations. They discovered that the world was full of unnoticed beauty, and that sharing it created connection. In joy, he realized that her perspective was a gift that helped him appreciate life more fully. Even in silence, they felt connected, sitting together on the steps outside his building or walking quietly through a street. They developed a comfort that did not require words. They shared presence and attention, and in that space, they found emotional intimacy. She felt safe and respected, and he felt understood and valued. They began to experience small celebrations together, a minor success at her job, a small personal victory, or simply a clear sky after rain, became opportunities to share joy. He realized that happiness could be multiplied by sharing it with someone who cared deeply. He found satisfaction in witnessing her smiles and laughter and in supporting her without fanfare. He also observed her interactions with others. She treated strangers with respect and kindness, offering help when needed or a comforting word. She did not expect anything in return, and this humility fascinated him. He learned from her example and tried to emulate that grace in his own interactions. Through these experiences, they were learning about each other and about themselves. They were discovering the value of empathy, trust, and patience. He realized that love was not only about attraction, but also about understanding, supporting, and growing together. She began to see him as more than a wealthy man, his influence, or his status, but as someone who genuinely cared and listened and valued her for who she was. Their relationship was not about grand gestures or dramatic events, but about the accumulation of small moments that built trust, respect, and affection. They were creating a connection based on shared humanity and mutual appreciation. The quiet depth of their bond was more powerful than any outward display of wealth or status. By the end of this part of the story, the man and woman had established a rhythm of presence, support, and understanding. They had begun to see each other clearly and appreciate the depth of their connection. Their relationship was evolving naturally, with patience and care, and the foundation for a deep and lasting bond was being laid. As the days passed, the bond between the man and the woman became stronger yet more complicated. They were aware that the outside world did not always understand their connection. Colleagues, friends, and even strangers sometimes cast judgmental glances or made quiet comments, he felt the pressure of society's expectations and knew that some people doubted the sincerity of their relationship. She too felt apprehensive, worried that she might not be able to belong in his world, or that she might be judged unfairly by others. They spoke openly about these concerns and reassured each other that their connection was genuine and based on mutual respect. These external pressures, they found solace in their time together. One afternoon, they walked through a quiet street where the city seemed to slow down around them. She spoke about her fears and insecurities, and he listened attentively without judgment, offering comfort and understanding. He shared his own concerns about public perception and the pressure of his position, and she responded with empathy, acknowledging the challenges he faced, but also reminding him that their bond was separate from the opinions of others. They discovered that true connection required courage and honesty. It was not enough to simply enjoy each other's company. They had to confront their fears, their doubts, and the societal expectations that tried to dictate the terms of their relationship. They chose to focus on their own understanding of each other, valuing trust, respect, and authenticity above all else. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the tall buildings, they sat on the steps outside the building, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. She shared a story from her childhood about standing up for someone who was being treated unfairly and how it had shaped her sense of justice. He listened with admiration, realizing that her principles were deeply ingrained and reflected the strength of her character. He felt a growing respect and affection for her that went beyond superficial attraction. They also faced moments of doubt. Each had experienced times in life when people had misunderstood or betrayed them. They were cautious not to let past experiences cloud their present interactions, yet they knew that vulnerability was necessary to deepen trust. He would sometimes worry that his wealth and influence would create distance, and she worried that her modest circumstances would make her feel out of place. They confronted these fears openly and reassured each other. With patience and understanding, they began to share small challenges in life and celebrate minor victories together. She told him about difficult days at work or unexpected expenses, and he responded with quiet support without making her feel indebted. He learned that offering help with humility could strengthen trust rather than diminish it. She responded to his gestures with genuine gratitude, yet never allowed it to create imbalance in their relationship. Their conversations grew deeper. They spoke about values, dreams, and what they hoped to achieve in life. She expressed her desire for a stable future and the importance of independence. He shared his reflections on success, responsibility, and the meaning of fulfillment. They discovered common ground in their appreciation for honesty, kindness, and the small joys of life, and they began to understand that love was more than attraction. It was a shared journey of growth and understanding. One day they decided to spend a few hours exploring a quiet part of the city. They walked slowly, noticing details that others overlooked. The texture of walls, the pattern of leaves on the ground, the movement of light across windows. They spoke softly about what they observed, finding joy in shared attention. He realized that being with her made him more present, more aware, and more appreciative of life itself. Over time, he noticed subtle changes in himself. He became more patient, attentive, and considerate in every aspect of his life. He found himself noticing the needs of others and responding with empathy rather than indifference. She had a calming effect on him, teaching him that strength often lay in quiet understanding rather than control. He realized that observing her kindness and resilience was shaping him into a better person. She too felt changes. She learned to trust more deeply and allowed herself to accept joy without fear or hesitation. She began to embrace opportunities she had previously avoided, feeling confident in the knowledge that he supported her without judgment. They were teaching each other about the value of patience, humility, and the importance of being fully present in each moment. They shared moments of silence and laughter alike, sitting together outside the building or walking along quiet streets. They felt a sense of peace that neither had experienced before. Their connection did not rely on dramatic gestures or overt declarations, but on the accumulation of small, consistent moments of understanding, care, and shared humanity. Also discovered the importance of balance. He never pressured her into situations She found uncomfortable, and she allowed herself to express her thoughts and feelings freely. They learned that true intimacy was built on respect for boundaries and the willingness to honor each other's autonomy. Their trust grew steadily as they navigated these small yet significant aspects of life together. One evening, a small challenge arose when she received troubling news about her family. He listened attentively and offered comfort and practical support without making her feel helpless or reliant on him. She found strength in his calm presence, and they worked together to address the situation with care and thoughtfulness. This experience reinforced their bond, showing that partnership required both emotional support and practical understanding. They continued to find joy in small shared experiences. He would point out the beauty in everyday details, and she would respond with delight, adding her own observations. They discovered that noticing life together created a deep sense of connection and mutual appreciation. He realized that her perspective was a gift that helped him see the world in ways he had long forgotten. Through these experiences, they also faced external scrutiny. Their connection was occasionally questioned by people who could not understand their bond. He felt the weight of judgment, yet chose to prioritize their relationship over societal opinion. She occasionally felt insecure, but learned to focus on the authenticity of their shared experiences, rather than the criticism of outsiders. Together, they navigated these pressures with honesty and patience, reinforcing the strength of their connection. They began to discuss future possibilities. Even in small ways, she spoke about aspirations she had long held quietly, and he encouraged her to pursue them. He provided discreet support, ensuring that she had the means to explore her ambitions without feeling dependent or obligated. This careful balance of support and respect strengthened their trust and deepened their emotional intimacy. They celebrated small milestones in each other's lives. He took pleasure in her successes, and she found comfort in his encouragement. They shared laughter and quiet moments of reflection, realizing that love was built not on grand gestures, but on the consistent presence of care, understanding, and mutual support. And in mundane activities, they discovered meaning together. They walked through markets, observed the rhythm of daily life, and engaged with the world in a way that felt gentle and mindful. They shared insights, reflections, and small acts of kindness, discovering that these moments created a foundation for enduring connection. Through these weeks, they continued to grow closer. Each interaction added layers of trust, respect, and affection. They learned to navigate fears, insecurities, and societal pressures together, building a bond rooted in authenticity and shared humanity. Their relationship matured into one where love was expressed through attention, empathy, and steady support, rather than dramatic declarations or external approval. By the end of this part of the story, they had faced challenges, openly supported each other through difficulties, and found joy in simple shared experiences. Their connection was resilient, thoughtful, and deeply human. They understood that true love required courage, honesty, and patience, and that these qualities were the foundation for a relationship that could endure beyond external pressures and societal expectations. As time went on, the bond between the man and the woman deepened. They had spent months sharing moments of trust, understanding, and quiet joy. Their connection had grown beyond casual encounters. Rooted in respect, empathy, and genuine care, he realized that the feelings he had developed for her were not fleeting but profound. She too had come to trust him deeply. Feeling safe and valued in his presence, they continued to support each other. In small and meaningful ways, he would help her manage challenges that arose at work or in her personal life without making her feel indebted. She appreciated the discreet assistance and felt inspired to pursue her dreams and ambitions with confidence. He found joy in seeing her thrive, knowing that his support was part of a larger pattern of care rather than a display of power or influence there. Conversations became increasingly intimate. They spoke about hopes for the future, the kind of life they wanted to build, and the values they wanted to uphold. She shared her desire for stability and meaningful work. He reflected on what fulfillment meant to him and how he could be a better partner. They discussed fears and insecurities and learned to reassure each other through words and gestures. Their emotional intimacy grew steadily. One afternoon, they decided to spend time in a quiet part of the city, that neither had explored before. They walked slowly, noticing the details of their surroundings, the way sunlight reflected on windows and the subtle patterns in the streets. She pointed out small things he would have overlooked, and he admired her attention to life. The simple act of sharing these observations strengthened their bond and brought them closer emotionally. They also faced moments of tension. They worried about public perception and the judgment of others. Friends and colleagues occasionally questioned their relationship, but they chose to focus on their understanding of each other rather than external opinions. These challenges reinforced the need for honesty, communication, and mutual support. They found that overcoming obstacles together strengthened the foundation of their connection. On the evening they sat quietly on the steps outside the building, watching the city lights. He reflected on the journey that had brought them together, from a brief encounter to a deep and meaningful relationship. She shared her gratitude for the support and care he had provided over time, and he expressed admiration for her resilience, courage, and kindness. They acknowledged that their bond had been built through shared moments and consistent presence rather than dramatic gestures. They began to make small plans for the future. He spoke about creating experiences together that were meaningful rather than extravagant. She shared ideas about projects she wanted to pursue and ways they could support each other. They discussed ways to continue growing individually while nurturing their relationship. Their dialogue reflected a mature understanding that true partnership requires balance, patience, and shared responsibility. Their relationship matured. They discovered that love was expressed through actions as much as words. They celebrated small milestones with attention and care, recognizing that each shared moment added depth and meaning to their bond. He found joy in her successes, and she found comfort in his consistent presence. They were learning to appreciate the quiet power of steady support and genuine empathy. They also discovered the importance of shared experiences in building intimacy. They explored parks, streets, and small neighborhoods, noticing the patterns of life around them. They spoke softly about what they saw and felt, and learned to find joy in the everyday. They discovered that attentiveness to each other, to the world around them, created a profound sense of connection and mutual appreciation. The man observed the growth in himself. He became more patient, thoughtful, and attentive in every aspect of his life. He found himself engaging with people at work with greater empathy and awareness. His connection with her had influenced him profoundly, showing him that true strength and fulfillment came from kindness, understanding, and genuine human connection. He valued her presence as a constant reminder of what mattered most. To experienced growth, she learned to trust fully and allow herself to experience joy without fear. She embraced opportunities to pursue her aspirations. Knowing he would support her without judgment, their relationship became a source of strength, inspiration, and confidence for both of them. They had created a space where vulnerability and trust were met with care and respect. They faced small challenges along the way sometimes. Misunderstandings arose, or external pressures created doubt, but they addressed each situation with open communication and empathy. They learned to navigate differences and reassure each other that their connection was strong enough to withstand obstacles. They discovered that true love involves resilience, patience, and a willingness to confront fears together. One afternoon they spent time in a quiet garden. He noticed the way she interacted with her surroundings, the way she paused to admire a flower or listen to the wind. She shared observations about life and growth, and he responded with appreciation. They reflected on the journey that had brought them together, acknowledging the effort, trust, and care that had made their relationship possible. They realized that the love they shared was rooted in shared experiences and mutual understanding. They began to plan for long-term commitments in thoughtful ways. They discussed how they could support each other in future endeavors and the kind of life they wanted to create together. Their conversations reflected a deep, mutual respect and a recognition that love required continuous effort and attention. They understood that sustaining a relationship involved not only affection, but also shared responsibility and charisma. They spent more time together. They continued to explore the city and the world around them, discovering small joys and meaningful experiences there. Connection deepened through shared observation, reflection, and support. They celebrated achievements, both big and small, and found satisfaction in the steady accumulation of meaningful moments. They understood that the strength of their bond came from consistency, empathy, and authenticity. They also took time to appreciate the quiet moments of simply being together. Sitting on the steps outside the building or walking slowly through streets, they found comfort in the shared presence of the other. They did not need constant conversation or activity to feel connected. They had learned that true intimacy often arises from the calm presence of someone who understands and values youth. Through all of these experiences, they discovered that love was not about status or wealth, but about understanding, care, and shared humanity there. Relationship was grounded in mutual respect, patience, and attention to the needs and feelings of each other. They had built a connection that was resilient, thoughtful, and deeply human. By the end of this part of the story, the man and the woman had created a life together defined by trust, understanding, empathy, and shared joy. They had navigated external pressures, internal doubts, and the challenges of two very different worlds, yet emerged with a bond that was strong and authentic. They had learned that true love requires courage, honesty, patience, and a willingness to grow together, and that these qualities form the foundation of a relationship. Capable of enduring beyond any obstacle, life did not stop after they chose each other. Instead, it opened in new ways that required patience, effort, and understanding. The man and the woman entered a phase where love was no longer just discovery, but responsibility. They now had to protect what they built while continuing to grow as individuals. They began spending more structured time together, planning days instead of meeting by chance, yet they kept the simplicity that had defined their bond. Mornings often started with quiet walks and evenings ended with calm conversations about how the day had unfolded. These routines created stability and comfort, helping both feel grounded. Man slowly introduced her to more parts of his world. He did this carefully, making sure she never felt out of place or overwhelmed when she entered unfamiliar spaces. He stayed close not as a shield, but as reassurance. She noticed how he adjusted his pace and behavior so she could feel at ease. This effort meant more to her than grand gestures ever could. She, on the other hand, invited him deeper into her world. He visited places that held meaning in her life, small cafes, familiar streets, and quiet spots where she had once sat alone dreaming of a better future. He listened as she shared memories of struggle and hope. He realized that these places shaped her strength and resilience. There were moments of misunderstanding. As with any real relationship, sometimes silence replaced words, and doubts crept in. During such moments, they chose conversation over distance. They spoke honestly about feelings even when it felt uncomfortable. This openness helped them grow stronger and prevented small issues from becoming walls. The man faced pressure from his professional circle. Some expected him to prioritize image and status over personal happiness. He was advised to keep his personal life separate and quiet. Instead, he chose honesty. He did not explain himself to everyone, but he no longer hid what mattered to him. This quiet confidence marked a change in him. She too faced challenges. Some people questioned her intentions or assumed she depended on him. She responded not with anger but with dignity. She continued working, pursuing her goals, and staying true to herself. Her independence became her strongest voice, and slowly those who doubted began to see her truth. Learn to celebrate ordinary days, a peaceful meal shared, a calm walk after sunset, or a long conversation under the open sky. These moments reminded them that happiness was not rare or distant. It existed in consistency, presence, and shared care. Man noticed how love changed his leadership style. He became more empathetic, more attentive to people around him. He listened better and valued perspectives he once ignored. This shift was not forced. It came naturally from learning how deeply one person could impact another through kindness alone. She grew more confident in expressing herself. She spoke her mind with clarity and calm, knowing her voice was respected. Their relationship gave her strength not by dependence but by mutual belief. They encouraged each other to pursue growth without fear of being left behind. They also discussed the future. With realism, they spoke about challenges they might face and how they would address them together. They agreed that no path was perfect, but commitment meant choosing each other even during uncertainty. These conversations brought comfort rather than fear. One evening, they returned to the steps. Outside the building where everything began, they sat quietly remembering the first conversation. First smile and the slow building of trust. The moment felt full circle, yet stronger, richer, and deeper. They both understood how far they had come. They did not promise perfection. They promised effort, honesty, and care. They understood that love was not a moment, but a practice, built every day through choices, actions, and understanding. This awareness grounded them and gave their bond lasting strength. As time continued, they moved forward together, carrying the lessons they had learned. Their story was not defined by wealth or struggle, but by two people who chose to see each other fully. Love had found them quietly, and they chose to honor it with patience, courage, and truth.